My name's Charlie Mansfield, Dr. Charlie Mansfield. I run the Masters for Travel Writers programme, and today we're going to look in particular at how travel writers can become involved and engaged in destination experience design. This work is based on a track of publications that I've published over the last 5 years, and they provide the narrative for this lecture. I looked at the Tourism, which was developed from a mixture of Bourdieu's cultural capital in placemaking and work by Blanchot. I then went on to work with Nantes, the DMO, the Destination Management Office in Nantes in Western France, to develop a place branding observatory for them. And finally, back to some ethnographic research with a project I called #Waytales, and that's published and available as well. All three of these papers are available on ResearchGate, and I'll give you the full references in the references pages at the end of this PowerPoint. Why is this knowledge creation process of value to you? Well, it allows you to professionalise your development as a practitioner in the tourism industry, rather than just learning. We're learning a lot, but it gives you opportunities to engage then with the DMO in your town, if you're in Bournemouth or Plymouth or wherever you were based at home, is that you can form links with the DMO and offer them free services, but also develop your portfolio until you can do commissioned work for them. My aim then was to give DMOs a commissioning process for tourism knowledge specialists, and by tourism knowledge specialists I mean academics in universities, but also their master's students, their postgraduate research students, PhDs, and enabled us to continue to explore the theory, big traditional theory from Bourdieu, Blanchot, and the big sociological theorists, but also put that theory into practice in a way that could be seen by the DMO, by the potential commissioner, or by stakeholders in the tourism industry. These theorists, amongst them I include Foucault, writing the self, literary analysis of travel texts, people like Catherine Belser and the French theorist Althusser, and that allows you to grow your identity as a writer. And if we come round the clock face now to place branding, we can easily, in a few weeks, set up a place branding observatory, and that allows us to do empirical research using the software package called NVivo from QSR International. It allows us to work with the DMO to find out where there's tourism product gaps, where they're not explaining their tourism offer very well. We can then do more practical field work of designing guided walks using writing plateaus, and the theorist behind that was Gilles Deleuze and Guattari and their 1,000 plateaus. And also finally field ethnography, which feeds back into academic practice and academic theory. I use phenomenological analysis, interpretive interviews and critical hermeneutics for that, and I'll talk about that in detail a little bit later. After the stage of designing guided walks, I found in my research that this was the stage where, and I do the takeoff with the pinkish coloured arrow there, this is the stage where new literary travel writing, you can start to do the creation, the writing part. My first big theoretical discovery during my research, during my doctor's, my PhD, was the Tourism. I discovered that doing semi-staged and co-created tourist experience work with locals and tourists, and I worked particularly on a little unknown seaside town and fishing port called Concarneau, which is down in southern Finistère on the south coast of Brittany. There's a novel associated with that, a detective novel called The Yellow Dog, by Georges Simenon, Le Chien Jaune in French. I led and some self-directed movement of locals and of case participants in my case study around the urban space using the topology from the novel. This gave me a chance to do staged opportunities for the tourists to write and to document their experience in a text of their own that would be taken seriously by the researcher and by other people in the research project. I was looking particularly for what we try to achieve when we're doing experience design for holidaymakers, and I use that term holidaymakers to break us free from the tourist, so we can think about people actually producing something whilst they're away on holiday. And I use this model, extended it a little, a model from Lang and Frost 2017 from their journal article Journeys of Wellbeing. Again, I give the full reference and link to this in the last 2 slides. They have a model called Drama, and I added on to that identity growth, which is your growth as a travel writer. The types of emotion that people want to feel when they are holiday making and that give them satisfaction are detachment and recovery. When we say get away from it all, that's the detachment and recovery. We go on holiday to recover for the busy urban life, the busy business life that we lead. Autonomy, where on holiday you can make your own mind up when to have breakfast or where to have breakfast. Mastery and achievement, I would class that amongst serious leisure, where people go to learn a new skill, a leisure skill on holiday like painting, writing, or understanding geology or geography. Meaning, where the holiday has got some meaning to them in some way, maybe with friends, and they're creating a closer bond, and that neatly segues into affiliation and relationships. Often we go on holiday from one extreme, the holiday romance, but also going to visit family and friends to build up affiliations and relationships. I added on to Lang and Frost's model with the idea of identity growth, which I took from writing. In a very practical sense, for the DMO, and my example was Nantes in Western France, is to be able to offer them a place branding observatory so that they can monitor the way that travel journalists are writing about their destination. And it's a simple process to explain that it is quite time consuming, but it's the type of activity that you could do for a dissertation project or for part of a PhD project, is to collect travel articles from online newspapers and from online magazines for the city or destination that you're doing, looking at their branding analysis. Remembering that true city branding requires this analysis phase to elicit users' emotions and to discover dimensions of well-being in the city. Then to process and analyse using NVivo, and the example that I have on the right-hand side of this slide is a word cloud. NVivo produces these quite easily once you have the data all pasted in there. And we'll turn over in a moment and we'll look at the query matrix display, which helps the DMO to decide what to do next. This is the query matrix display option in NVivo. Once you have all your data in there and you've coded it according to some themes, and I use the general themes from place branding analysis, and very quickly you can produce this type of 3-dimensional graph which shows you and the DMO where they're not communicating. The great peaks that look like tower blocks or skyscrapers on the graph are where they're doing well and communicating the place branding element, but those long streets with nothing in them, for example 06 Society, it's a long empty street there that they're not doing any communication at all. And so that would identify for you and the DMO where they need to put effort and spend some money in commissioning a travel writer to work on Society and produce some articles around that. So how do you go out into the field, into a city or town, to begin to get a topology, a spatial awareness of what a visiting tourist doing urban tourism might do when they're holiday making? And I developed a concept of using the plateaus, which was from Deleuze, is from Deleuze, and I looked at how a European city usually stretches up from a river or from the sea and stretches uphill into the town. The starting point would be down by the coast or the riverbank, which might be the hotel, and you're heading as far away as possible to point 4, which ought to be something like a museum, a typical tourism product point that the holidaymaker is aiming for. And then the guided walk can follow those 6 plateaus. When they're the furthest point away, they're at the most exciting destination in the city, and then on the way back they're finding time to talk and write and sit in cafes, so that gives us those 6 stopping spaces. I applied this to Amsterdam for a project I did last year, designed a walk. I think you can still see the ellipse in there. It takes a while to pick it out, but I've done some orange numbers for the stopping points. I started the walk near the Opera House, which is also, it's on Waterloo Plain, which is quite near to a big underground metro station. So it was a great starting point for gathering a group of about 12 walkers I took round on this route, and took them around the 6 stops. The furthest point number 4, is Arkham. It's an architecture museum that explains the architecture of the contemporary architecture of Amsterdam. So it was a good stopping point, somewhere to aim for. And on the way back at point number 5, near one of the bridges, there was a chance to sit in a coffee shop and talk. Back in the lab, working with the script, I delivered the script, written and delivered the script with its 6 plateaus or 6 stopping points, but then we brought that back to the classroom, back into the laboratory for the writers, and looked at how we could then improve it once we'd had the experience, and to fit those experiences back in and adjust them. And I developed 3 ways of processing and handling a travel guide script, which would eventually become a piece of travel writing. And that was to use themes, which I mark out in types of yellow background, something I call seeds of ideas, the ideas that you might want to seed through the travel text, and finally bigger layers that would fit with the place branding elements that the DMO wanted to explain. In the field, either with a group of case study participants, or more likely now, which is more of the work that I'm doing at the moment, is to go with other research collaborators in smaller groups, 2s, 3s, 4s, to walk the route with the script and with a plan of what we're trying to achieve, take the body out into the field and investigate those untapped processes that may be included in the literary travel writing. And now I include that extra adjective in front of travel writing and think of it as being literary. So we're seeking out places of drama in the past or emotion, and continually asking the other collaborators when we're walking around or when we're stopping at our plateaus is, what do you really enjoy out here? And finding ways of doing very small ethno interviews with the peer partners to collect that extra emotional twist, and I'm beginning to use the word, a type of dialogical link between 2 spots or 2 plateaus. Again, out in the field, always on the lookout for places of emergence. So participants are noting the marvellous in everyday places at the destination, and the writer-researcher is also looking for places of emergence in the testimony of their case study participants or with their colleagues. I've used this idea in Stonehouse, which is an area in Plymouth, one of the old parts of the town, looking for emerging areas and using points of tourist entry to this revitalised urban space to create literary travel writing texts. These begin to form my portfolio, or if it's you doing the work, your portfolio, with which to gain new writing commissions from the DMOs or for other stakeholders. So shifting a little bit now, the travel writer begins to work in the field of the urban space to gain insight on the geomorphology, the lie of the land, but also to experience those emotions and record these using, I tell my travel writing students to use the first person, say I and we, and look at urban field work as a source of pleasure. This is what we're working on in holiday making and tourism. One thing you could talk about is the gravity, the experience of gravity, walking up the hill away from the seafront or the river, and then the pleasure of walking back down a slope when you're tired at the end of the project. One such commission that I finished in March of 2020 was to look at ethnobotany in Newquay, how hoteliers, restaurateurs and ethnographic museums, museums of local life, could explain their offering to tourists through this medium of literary travel writing, rather than say in a brochure, is to use a different tourism discourse to explain their message. And this professionalises your development as a practitioner in the tourism industry, and again begins, or more than begins, to build your portfolio as a writer. As you do and complete the research for the travel writing articles or vignettes, it also gives you deep experience, deep mapping experience of the town that you're currently working on, which equips you perfectly to offer guided walks from the spring and summer season onwards. And again, it's a way of working with the DMO but earning something whilst you're building your portfolio. So a group of 12 doing a guided walk, usually people pay currently in 2020 prices about £4.50 each, so a guided walk would earn you £54. The outlay for it is your labour and the research that you have done for the travel writing plateaus. If you can manage 3 of those a day, that's £160 a day, getting on for £900 a week through the summer season. If you wrote those up and delivered them as ebooks via Google Play, then sell those for about £8.50, £9, then that brings in income as well, whilst you're growing and developing your identity as a travel writer. And finally, in order to continue your relationship with the DMO, then you could provide travel writing workshops. I've done these quite successfully in Plymouth and in Totnes, a little bit closer to home, using the psychogeographer's walk around town called La Dérive, the derive or the drift. It translates as drift in English, but it's a little bit more organised than that. You take a glass, pop it on the map, the town map, draw around the base of the glass, and then as closely as possible you follow that route around the town. This was quite a challenge in Totnes because it's divided by quite a big river, the River Dart, that flows down from Dartmoor to Dartmouth. So it gave quite a challenge to try and keep as closely as possible to the derive line, the circular line around town, but produces a very useful route and a challenge for the travel writer to find those plateaus in that space to write about. And I did keep notes on this, and I've loaded those up to ResearchGate if anyone is interested, and did turn it into a piece of travel writing. Those are the 2 pages of references then. I've made links. You know, anything with the URL links to the web can break one day when people move data around. But on the whole, most of mine are on ResearchGate. So navigating to ResearchGate is a good starting point for any of my work. If you want to get in touch, my website is eserve.org.uk, or you can search for me at the university and find my email address from there. Thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to being able to speak to you again on another subject on another day. Bye bye. Bye.